failed us in that. Our government has failed us in the sense of helping us to become energy independent. And even today, if you take your credit card and put it in the gas pump to buy gas, you're helping to make the Saudi royal family just a little bit more obscenely rich, and actually to make our country a little less safe. Where do you think the terrorists get the money to finance the terrorism they use against us? It's the oil money out of the Middle East. I'm tired of hearing people say in 20 or 30 years we're going to be energy independent. I say we need to do it in 10. You say, well, that's a pretty bold initiative. You bet it is. It's a pretty bold country. I can remember John F. Kennedy, 1961, saying, we'll put a man on the moon and bring him back in 10 years. People laughed because at that time we had a space program that essentially had the technology of bottle rockets. 8 years later, I sat there on the floor of my parents' living room. I remember watching that old black and white television, but I saw Neil Armstrong put his feet on the moon and say, that's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. And I think about what we did in this country in a short period of time because we said we would. In 3 years, we built an atomic bomb that ended World War II. This is a country that when it decides it really wants to do something, it can. And now we need to decide we want to become energy independent and provide self-sustaining, renewable, environmentally friendly energy sources that will power our generations to come. Because a country that's going to be free has to be able to feed itself. That's why a strong agricultural economy is important. I'm not saying that just because I'm in Iowa. Hey, I'm from Arkansas. You guys have corn and you have hogs, we have chicken, and we've got rice. So I understand something about the agricultural economy. But let me tell you what I understand even more than just being Homer for my state. I understand that a country that can't feed itself and that depends on somebody else for its food is indebted to that country for its existence and survival. Ladies and gentlemen, the last thing we need is to be dependent upon China for something else, including our food. And the day that we have our dependency on somebody else for food, I would say this. If you think it's tough being dependent upon foreign oil, wait until the day when we're dependent upon foreign food. God help us if we ever let that happen. By the way, that Dick Cheney wants to take me hunting, and I told him I couldn't go. We've got to be able to feed ourselves. Secondly, we've got to be able to fuel ourselves. We need our own energy sources. A country that's not free is not free if it has to depend on somebody else to provide its energy needs. And a country has to be also capable of fighting for itself. That means that we don't need to have the weapons of our defense manufactured by some other country, and we have to ask their permission to buy a fighter or a tanker or the ammunition for our weapons of self-defense. But when you can feed yourself and fuel yourself and fight for yourself, you're really free and nobody can take it from you. When you depend upon anybody else for that, you're only as free as they allow you to be. One of my goals as president was to make sure that those three things we could always do, and we could do them sooner, not later. And that's urgent for every single one of us to consider. And yes, I know we're at war with the Islamic jihadists, and I do understand it perhaps in a way most people don't, because as politically incorrect as this is to say, folks, we're in a theological war. This is not a traditional, typical, conventional war against borders and boundaries. We're not fighting a nation. We're fighting a religious ideology that's fanatic, that's determined. It doesn't care whether this war takes 1,000 days or 1,000 years. They're in it for the long haul. And we better be in it for the long haul. And with all due respect to some on the other side, this is not a war where if we just leave them alone, they will leave us alone. Right. That's naive. And it's dangerous. And it's also dangerous when we have people who are running for president that will not take a stand against George Soros and his sorry organization that took out a full-page ad questioning the honor and integrity of General Petraeus this week. And it's perfectly okay to question the president, to disagree with the president, to disagree with General Petraeus if you wish. In this country, that's our privilege, our right. But it's people like General Petraeus who bought us that right. It's people like General Petraeus and the honorable men and women serving with him that gave us our freedom. And if we want to question his judgment as to how he's leading the military, that's okay. And I won't even say that a person who does that is unpatriotic or un-American. May be different, don't share my view, but that's fine. That's their right as an American citizen. But you cross a line when you claim that a person leading our men and women into battle this very minute and getting shot at is guilty of treason. That's a serious charge. Treason on a military officer taking people into battle is an offense punishable by death. It is the equivalent of accusing somebody of capital murder. And for George Soros to do that is horrible. But let me tell you what's even worse. That there are people who say they want to be commander-in-chief of our military who don't have the guts to stand up to George Soros and call him out on it and condemn it. And I would say whether it's Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or John Edwards or any of the Democrats running for president, if they're not willing to take the stand for General Petraeus, even if they disagree with his policies, disagree with his military tactics, if they will not stand behind their own generals against a charge of treason, then what military person in uniform would want them as a commander-in-chief knowing they won't stand with them when the time comes for it to count? That's why, ladies and gentlemen, this election is not just about politics. It's about the direction of our country, and it's why we've got to get serious about where we're headed. I think this country has got great days ahead of it. I refuse to believe that the greatest generation is the one that's already lived and gone. I want to believe the greatest generation is the one that hadn't even been born yet. But the sad thing is, in this country, there's a lot of the greatest generation yet to be born that won't be born because we have a culture of killing that doesn't happen in Iraq, it happens right here, where we take the lives of completely innocent unborn children. I'm not a pro-life person because I got into politics and decided that in the Republican primary I needed to say that because that would make you feel better. I got into politics because I'm pro-life. The fact is, it troubles me when people don't understand that being pro-life is not a political position. It's a deeply held understanding of our civilization and our culture. What separates us from the Islamic jihadist is that we value the intrinsic worth of every human life and believe every life is precious, unique, and worth defending. We treat each life in our culture as if it represents the life of the rest of us. And that's why when it was the 6 coal miners in Huntington, Utah, we cared about what happened to them. We didn't know them. It wasn't that they were going to have a place at our Thanksgiving table. It's just that they were fellow human beings and fellow Americans, and it mattered what happened to them. When the 12-year-old Boy Scout got lost in the woods of North Carolina a year ago, I don't recall anyone saying, you know, that's just the problem his parents are going to have to deal with. It'd get real expensive for us to go do a search party for the kid, and he should have known better than to wander away from the campsite. Nobody said that. What did we say? Go get that kid. When the 3 hikers got stranded up in the mountains of Mount Hood, Oregon, helicopters and airplanes and snowmobiles were launched to go try and find them. It wasn't because any of them were Nobel Peace Prize winners. We didn't do it for that reason. We did it because that could have been us up there. And we wanted to treat them just as we would want to have been treated had we been lost in the woods of Mount Hood. You see, for me, that really explains what being pro-life is. And whether the life is in the womb of its mother or in the womb of the earth in a coal mine, we care about that life. And we value it, we celebrate it, we elevate it, and we don't treat it cheaply or indifferently. And we don't consider its being saved an inconvenience to us. We consider it an obligation of our moral code. It's a non-negotiable for me, and I just want you to understand that as a governor, I passed bills of legislation, Fetal Protection Act, waiting periods before people could get an abortion, parental consent, because I think it's absurd that a parent would have to give permission to take an aspirin at school, but a teenage girl could have a serious surgical procedure that not only would terminate one life, but would forever alter her physically and emotionally, and her not even have to tell her parents, are you kidding me? What's wrong with us when we do that? We passed a constitutional amendment in our state that said that life begins at conception, and that we have the obligation to protect human life until its natural conclusion. I think it's one of the things that separate us and elevate us as a culture and society. And compare that to the Islamic jihadists who would strap a bomb to the belly of their own children, march that child into a crowded room of innocent people and detonate the bomb, and then celebrate the death of their child for having died for God. Well, I think our God would want us to sacrifice ourselves for our children, not sacrifice our children for ourselves. That's what makes us different. And so, as a president, I want you to know it's not just that I'm going to make speeches about being pro-life. And that's one thing. I'm glad all the other Republicans, well, no, that's not even true. It starts to say all the other Republicans